the habits are truly a source of energy. So it can help us conserve energy and then also make habits that refill our cup and give us energy. The whole point of going through the friction to make it a habit is to get to that point where you look back and you're like, wow, I'm choosing the better option on habit, on autopilot. And so you're not spending any of your energy on it.
I
Now you
love
get to
that.
go apply that to other things. And like our brain is truly, it wants to be in the grip of a habit because it gets to power down.
Yep.
So let's get those habits built and they're going to happen either way. So
Yeah.
let's find as many as we can to get that on autopilot where it's feeding us and loving these beautiful bodies of ours.
Welcome to the Inspired Living with Autoimmunity podcast, the podcast for high achievers who want to stay sharp, focused, and full of energy despite their diagnosis. With your host, National Board Certified Functional Medicine Health Coach, Julie Michelson, where Julie helps you take your power back from autoimmunity. And now here's your host, Julie Michelson.
Welcome back to the Inspired Living with Autoimmunity podcast. I'm your host, Julie Michelson, and today I'm joined by Amy Behimer. Amy is a doctor of pharmacy and nationally board certified health and wellness coach who helps people ready to feel healthy no matter their autoimmune diagnosis. Amy lives with multiple sclerosis and has experienced massive shifts in physical, mental, and emotional health as a result of coaching, making it her mission to serve others by helping them learn how to love their life after a diagnosis. Amy shares stories, strategies, and questions for self-discovery and the science of all things habits and autoimmune health on her weekly podcast, The Habit Hub for Autoimmune Health. She offers a mix of coaching, community, and curated curriculum inside the club for those ready to make the shift from managing autoimmune disease to creating autoimmune health. In today's conversation, we're talking about creating the habits that lead to autoimmune health. Amy shares her framework and the importance of habitual thinking, feeling, and action to take charge of our lives and create wellness. Amy, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Julie. Excited to be here.
I am excited for our conversation as well. I would love to get to know, and for listeners, if those who don't know you yet, tell us a little bit about your journey, because I had said to you before we hit record, I can't believe I didn't meet you sooner.
It's funny how that happens. It's such a good reminder that the world is so big, and even the world of autoimmunity is so big.
It's true. It's
Yeah.
true. So how does a doctor of pharmacology become a health coach and this autoimmune expert?
Absolutely. So, like most people who end up, really diving in and becoming a student for life of a certain area, it's out of necessity for ourselves. And so, yeah, I do have an autoimmune story that includes a collection of a few different diagnoses. I started in my teens with vitiligo for all of you out there who may have that. Following that was Graves' disease, so a thyroid condition, and I'm chugging along in my mid-20s, and I end up with some IBD symptoms and throw another diagnosis there. And I still knew this whole time that that wasn't what my thing was. That wasn't what was wrong. And so at 27, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And I have to say that that diagnosis, for whatever reason, whatever I knew about it from school, the way that I was envisioning it could look in my future, stopped me in my tracks and really had me saying, whoa, something is trying to no longer whisper, but scream at me that it was not appreciating the way I was living my life, which really looked normal to everybody else.
Sure. Yeah.
As it often does.
Absolutely. And I can see, and for some listeners, maybe, any one of those diagnoses could be what stops you in your tracks, right? My beloved aunt struggled with MS, for her adult life, at least, as long as I was old enough to even understand what was going on. So I can certainly see how, not knowing what you know now, that would be the thing that would make you say, okay, you know what? Like I thought my body was telling me something, but this is not
Yeah.
the future I want.
Yeah, and I think what it was so tied to was this feeling of independence, this potential glimpse at mobility being affected and
Mhm.
already was affected in some ways.
Sure.
And so that's, the patient side that brought me to it.
Mhm.
And, now I realized, okay, I do think about this in a different way than most people. I do bring a scientific background, mixed with this coaching piece that I just feel I was born to do. And so it was just something that I couldn't stop learning about doing, serving. So here I am now. And I really, you'll hear me say it throughout. I really do call it autoimmune health on
Yeah.
purpose
Yeah.
because yeah,
Amen.
we have these diseases, but if we only look at the disease side of it, we're missing out on the trillions and trillions of cells that are working. And how do we lean into those a little bit more to help balance what's happening in our body?
I love that. And it can sound hard in the moment, I can hear the coach in you, the focusing on the positive, right? We may
Yeah.
have these
Yep.
things not working optimally in our body, but if we're here having the conversation, then there's a lot going right. So
Yes.
yeah.
And, and also included in my coach hat is, I live and believe and coach in this idea that all of life is 50-50. So,
Yeah.
for every positive, there potentially is a negative, but we don't even know what a good day is unless we have a bad day. And
Right.
so, yeah, embracing both of them, which you're nodding along, and I'm sure you also, work with, because yeah, we need both to find balance. And it would be unrealistic to think that we're only going to have the health side or the positive side. So it's all welcome, all of it.
Sure, sure. And the flip side of that too is so many of us don't even know how good we can feel until
Oh,
we start to feel better. We all only ever have the experience of what's going on in our body. So
yeah.
how do we compare until we can, achieve that up level and just start to feel? I remember I have a client who she's 70 now, love her. And when we were working through stuff in the beginning and changing out products and, identifying toxicity issues, she's literally at 70 years old learned that toothpaste doesn't hurt everybody's mouth, right? Like her whole life, her body was telling her, like, don't stop doing this
Yeah.
with the brand of toothpaste she was using. And she said until she switched and she looked at her husband and said, does toothpaste sting your mouth? And he was like, no, what are you talking about? What?
Wow.
And so we
Wow.
don't know, like our lens
Yeah.
is our lens. And so
Yeah.
until we can change it, like you said, even for me, it was the first time at the height of my struggles, the first time I changed the sheets on a bed, and it was not a big deal.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, this is how other people feel.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
I love both of those examples. And, the other thing about us is that just because something is common doesn't mean it's normal.
Right.
So like, yes, we have, I call it fatigue, the symptom
Yeah.
that binds many of us.
Mhm.
But the truth is, sometimes I think we get this message that autoimmunity equals fatigue. And so we kind of, people will kind of say this is just the way it is.
Right.
And that thought alone, that belief is so limiting because it doesn't
Yes.
have to be common. But you ask around, how are you doing? Busy, tired, and kind of
Right.
rewriting that from the get-go can be a real
Yeah.
game changer.
It's so true. I'm curious, like, how did you, because like I wish I had a coach. I wish I had heard of coaches. I wish, like you, I do what I do because I want to change the story, right? We want people to
Yeah.
know that there are options and that the body can heal and we
Yep.
can improve and life can get bigger instead of smaller. But you actually did experience coaching as part of your journey. How did you find coaching?
I did. It's serendipitous. And you look back and where did I first find that coach? But I had been in traditional therapy for years, and just to help me with some of the weight that it felt like
Mm-hmm.
having a diagnosis like MS. And I kind of got to this point where things were good, but I'm like, God, they could be better. And I ended up being exposed to a life coach at the time. And it was the first time that I really heard and was willing to accept and embrace that how we are thinking about something actually
Mm.
determines our reality. And
Yes.
so this coach said to me, I had this thought as soon as I was diagnosed, well, clearly my life will be worse now because I have
Right.
MS,
Right.
or I'll never be as healthy. And
Yeah.
everyone would agree with that. So it felt very, very true. And this coach
Yeah.
was willing to challenge and say, that's a thought. That doesn't
Right.
have to be the reality. And my mind was blown. And since then, I really am, it's been over a decade. I truly believe my life is not worse. I
Right.
truly believe I am healthier in so many
Mm-hmm.
emotional, metabolic, mind ways. And, good luck trying to get me to believe otherwise
Yeah.
because of that. So that's how I found it. And that one shift just opened the door to so much.
I love that. That's amazing. And for so many of us out there, yes, our thoughts create our reality, but so many of us are literally told
Yeah.
by our doctors when a diagnosis is delivered, we will decline, expect
Yes.
it, and
Yes.
and so gosh, if we could just change that one thing,
Yep. Yep.
how many people wouldn't have to be 10, I was 11 years into decline because that was what I was expecting to happen before I thought maybe there's another way
Yeah.
because if this continues, I won't be here very long, and so I love that, this is again why you have the podcast and your group. And it's just because we need to change that conversation.
Yeah. And I think one of the barriers for most people when they hear that is, well, that must be nice to have to think like that, or that must be nice.
Yeah.
And I like to really pull back the curtain and say, it's not that we either are lucky that we have this view or we don't. I
Right.
call, that, like you mentioned, the podcast is the habit hub for autoimmune
Right.
health. And the way I define a habit is there's three layers to it. We have habitual thinking, we have habitual feelings, and then we have habitual actions, kind of the habits that we typically think of. And so when I say that I shifted that thought or that belief, I approach it like a habit. Oh, I'm going to
Right.
practice this. I'm going to build that neural pathway, and it's tangible. It's not, okay, maybe one day I'll have this perspective. It's, oh no, we set a goal and we go after it and we make it a habit.
I love that you said that. And it's not magical thinking. And it's not like, oh, must be nice for you. You live on the sunny side of the street.
Yeah.
Like it's a choice. And
Yes.
and like any habit, it takes, practice. You use the word practice. It's a practice.
I got to speak at a conference earlier this year, and there was a panel, and there were many of us, and people got to ask questions. And, there were some amazing people that I was speaking with. And one of the questions was, mental health with these diagnoses and with MS is very real. So, how do you actually approach that? How does this fit in? And I so respect the other people on the panel, and they answered, you look at the different perspective, you do this. And it got to me, and I said, well, it was this therapy, then it was coaching, and then I met weekly, and then I had a group. It was very tangible steps to
Right.
actually close that gap. And I think that more and more people talking about that, I hope to be someone who's talking about that work of coaching, um, will give people some hope that it's not something you just have to wait to strike to hit you. We can do it.
Yeah, I love that. And let's talk a little bit about, the habit base of your work, right? I mean, your podcast, it's the habit hub for autoimmune health. So I think that's the perfect time, because it's not magic.
Yep.
I
Yep.
always say, like, if I had the magic wand, I would use it for you, I promise. So, tell us, let's go a little bit deeper. And you said so many things I want to highlight, but small steps. right?
Yeah.
So tell us about your approach and how it works.
Sure, sure. It kind of was born through my own personal work and starting retrospectively to look back and say, how is this working and why is this working? And then I'm just so grateful as I became a coach and got to work with others. And it really started to crystallize into this framework. And like we mentioned, the Habit Hub for Autoimmune Health. And what it covers is the 6 key areas of lifestyle. So there's a lot we can't control in
Right.
life, and our genes we can't control, but it's the 6 key areas that we do have some influence and control over. And like I said, it's a framework that is a hub on purpose to kind of show the balance of these things.
Mm-hmm.
I know I spent years going 110% on my diet,
Right.
and that makes
Yeah.
a bumpy ride
Mm-hmm.
when you neglect some of the other spokes. I always say you can't outnourish a crappy mindset.
Right.
And so, the 6 areas, and I'll just briefly touch on them, but our mindset. So
Mm-hmm.
that is pervasive throughout all of them. How are we thinking and feeling about all these things? We have food, we have movement, we have rest and relaxation, we have connections, and then we have good stresses. So for those of us with autoimmunity, we know that, if we put our brains and bodies and even our emotional selves up to a little challenge, we're going to come out stronger.
Yeah.
And, if you're listening, none of those things are you've never heard before. And that's a good thing. Like the science is the science, and
Right.
we get to pull on that, but presenting it in a framework that is usable. I call it the Habit Hub IRL in real life. We take it's beautiful on paper and it's
Right.
beautiful on a screen, but we actually pull it in, and what does that look like in real life to actually make progress and optimize these 6 key areas?
I love that. And I wish I had come up with the hub. I mean, it is, I'm sure you hear it all the time too. Like you just said with diet, right? Like it's like, oh, I've been doing this and it's not
Yeah,
working. And it's like, well, because you're only doing that
yeah,
and you're
yeah,
holding it so tightly that you're creating so much stress.
yeah.
So,
Or what are
um,
you thinking about it while you do it? Like there's
I'm
studies.
thinking about how this is, I have scarcity mindset and this is terrible, and it's not
Yes,
fair and all yeah, it's
all
so
of it.
true.
I
So
mean,
true.
and they play together. I mean, I became so fixated on making sure that inflammatory oils didn't touch my body that all of a sudden my connection spoke was depleted because I was saying no to going
Mm,
out and connecting over a meal. And
yes.
it's, we really, one of the 3 reasons, research-backed reasons that change feels hard or it doesn't last is that we don't have a common operating system. And
Mm,
so following a framework like the Habit Hub or like any one that speaks to you and makes sense
yeah.
helps us to be able to piece it all together. And how does this fit in? And, we're not just grabbing random information from all over because it's coming at us. There is
Right.
information everywhere.
There is, and not all of it's good.
Yep.
And like you said, it may not resonate. It might not be the right strategy for you. And one person's baby step may feel like somebody else's giant leap. And so it's
Absolutely.
finding what does resonate and building those successes.
Yep.
I find I'm always like slowing people down a little bit. Like, hey,
Yes.
your perfectionism is what got you here. Like, let's take a different approach this time.
I
So,
love that. And I always, we all want to feel better. That's another
sure,
commonality. And better for you, Julie, is different than better for me.
sure,
Better for me on a Monday is different than for me on a Friday, um,
yes,
or year after year. And so it's really always being able to apply it to yourself because you're the expert
right.
in yourself always.
Yeah. And don't limit yourself either as to what better can feel like,
Oh,
because
amen.
if you had asked me 5 years ago, I would have told you I couldn't possibly feel better
Yeah.
than I felt 5 years ago. And like every
Yeah.
6 months, I'm like, oh yeah, I can
Yeah.
apparently.
Yeah.
So
And
don't cap it.
well, and the fact is I have multiple sclerosis, and that, you know, that comes with some reminders, some symptoms. So
Right.
sometimes feeling better for me is feeling better about some of the things that don't feel good, or
Right.
some of the
Yeah.
loss or grief or frustration that can come with that. But it's removing some of the added layer of suffering
Yeah.
that we sometimes as humans can add to it.
I think most often, if we're not trying not to.
Yes. Yeah. Good
Yeah.
point. Good
Yeah.
point.
I like that. And people ask me all the time. I've been so blessed to be symptom free. But I know it doesn't mean I never feel a thing,
Yeah.
right? Like I've been in just right now, I'm in the heart of a stressful time. My sleep has been a little disrupted, which is unusual for me. I know the things, right? It's the
Yep.
same, and it's always a good reminder. Hopefully, always makes me a better coach.
Yeah.
But now you said it earlier, and I love saying that all the time too. Like the body will whisper, and if you ignore it, it'll get louder and louder until it's screaming.
Yeah.
Now I listen to the whispers,
Yeah. I love that.
and so I know I can't control, what's going on in life right now, that I need to step up and play a little hard. But I know I don't want to feel like I
Yeah.
felt 11 years ago.
Yeah.
So I know what I need to do. And sometimes we need that little reminder to up level,
Absolutely.
for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. Only you know when, I like to say we're going to exert energy, and you know the difference between exerting energy because you're climbing a mountain versus if you're
Right.
digging a hole.
Oh, I
And
love that.
and it's so true.
Yeah.
Like, and even all this with coaching, and my husband will always say, you're putting in a lot. And I tell him, I'm climbing a mountain right now. I'm okay. I hear
Right.
you. I hear you, but I'm taking that into account with this rest and relaxation, and which is one of the spokes, but sometimes it is good stress. That's climbing that mountain where
Well,
we're
which is
put
growth. That's where growth comes from, is
totally.
stress. But yeah, listen and knowing, like you said, like, okay, I'm still prioritizing rest and relaxation. It just doesn't look, I mean, for me, even this week,
Yeah.
that's why I was giggling at your Monday versus Friday. I'm like, oh, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. Yeah.
so I think that the listening is huge. And again, just like mindset, it's a skill.
Yeah.
We're not going to go from, the ignoring is also a survival skill for most people with autoimmunity, or, because we have to
Yeah.
push through. I was a single mom with 3 kids. If I,
Yeah.
walked around saying, oh, I can't do anything, that wasn't a possibility. So it's like that middle of the road, like listening, taking the right action.
Yeah.
But like you said, knowing kind of when, okay, I'm gonna climb a mountain today.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
the other cool thing about the hub is that usually there's always an area that it's so easy to think of the things we need to improve. Usually if you look around at those 6 areas, there's something that is going well. And there's something that
Yes.
we can pull on and learn from, and then just stay on top of yourself. That, like, rest and relaxation, that is the one I know I have to stay on top of, because
Yes.
it is very natural for me to neglect it. And so you
Yeah.
just start to learn about yourself through application in everyday life.
Yeah. I love that. Sure. For me at this point, eating the way I need to eat to support my body, it's easy. It
Natural.
doesn't,
Yeah.
yeah, that doesn't require any more conscious thought or effort. It just is. But remembering to
Yeah.
tap the brakes
Yeah.
sometimes.
Well, I love that you say that, because that's the other reason why I've hitched my cart to the habit bandwagon. Because A, there's a science to it, but also the habits are truly a source of energy. So it can help us conserve energy, and then also make habits that refill our cup and give us energy. So just what you said, the whole point of going through the friction to make it a habit is to get to that point where you look back and you're like, wow, I'm choosing the better option on habit, on autopilot. And so you're not spending any of your energy on it.
I
Now you
love
get to
that.
go apply that to other things. And like, our brain is truly, it wants to be in the grip of a habit because it gets to power down.
Mhm. Yep.
So let's get those habits built, and they're going to happen either way. So
Yeah.
let's find as many as we can to get that on autopilot where it's feeding us and loving these beautiful bodies of ours.
Oh, I love that you said that. It makes me think of, because we're not even conscious of how many decisions we make in a day, right? And they
Yep.
say, super successful people will basically wear the same thing every day
Yep.
because they're not making that. That's one decision they don't have to make. So
Yeah.
I love you mentioned the word fatigue earlier, which we can all relate to on some level. Doesn't mean that we have to live there.
Yes.
But oh my gosh, there's not one person listening who doesn't want more energy resources to use for whatever they want to use it for.
Absolutely.
And so,
I use a tracker with my clients inside the club, which is my group program. And I love it because it has the 6 areas, and it's broken up into what are the habits we're working on now, which ones are soon. They're on our list. We heard a podcast, we read a book. We want to get that in. Which ones are later? And then I always make sure we keep a section that are done, meaning we get to take them off the list where we're even working on them. But you have to keep them on your list because you need to remind your brain that didn't always come natural, and get to celebrate it. That's a win. That's a win. And so getting to see it in that way helps calm your brain down that A, you don't have to do it all at once. And B, again, back to that balance and making sure you get to always celebrate how far you've come.
I love that. That energy of making sure, and the puppies are giving their 2 cents here, making sure that we are, those celebrating is fueling. It just is. And so don't overlook that energy resource of,
Yes.
And most of us don't go through life with the habit of patting ourselves on the back and celebrating our wins. And so
Totally.
I always say that is one of my favorite jobs as a coach, is to help people celebrate their wins.
Yeah. And sometimes you need an outsider to say, this is a big deal.
Right.
Like, we're going to pause and do it. And in the habit science and in the habit research, that is it. That's your brain. Also, it tells your brain to go look for more. And it's just this thing that kind of snowballs and lets you know, oh, that thing felt good. I want more of that.
Yes. Yeah. Love it. Oh, so amazing. I know that you have put a lot of love into creating a quiz for people. And I want to talk a little bit about that because just tell me a little more about the tool. I know we're going to link to it in the show notes. And so, tell us about it.
Sure. So, years of people, saying, okay, they find out about, I have autoimmunity. They find out I'm a coach. What do I do? In that question, it's like, oh my goodness, I want to stop my life and let's talk. And so it really was trying to find a way that I could serve anybody who asked that question. Like, what should I do first? What should I do next? And it is truly, I used to provide a resource that was the 6 key areas and, something to do in each. And then I realized that is
too much.
I'm contributing to the information overload. So what if in 10 or 11 questions in under 3 minutes, you could just based on your intuition, on your gut, answer these fun questions and land at a result of your number 1 next best inflammation squashing, energy giving, cell loving habit that will help you move forward. And it's based on what we know from the science, and it's based on what we know from you and yourself. And if you take that, as counterintuitive as it seems, we want to do it all. But if you take that and you go all in, the magic that can happen, and the part I'm most proud of is when you get your result, it's not just, oh, this is the thing to do. It describes what area of the Habit Hub, which spoke, is calling your name. And it also talks about why it matters. So a little bit of the science of why it matters. It gives free resources. So certain links to my podcasts that relate, other free resources. And it really is simple and gives you strategies to get started. So I'm so proud of it because if people are willing to pay attention, slow down, and take it seriously, as if, okay, this is someone really helping me with my very next step, then there's so much gold to be had from it.
I love that. So good. And it is so true. I too have that, I want to help everybody with everything. And it is such a good reminder of like, okay, and now I've overwhelmed you. So you're going to be frozen. You're not going to do any of the things, so I will highly recommend for listeners to go ahead and take, even if you feel like you're, I don't even know how we would judge how far down the road on our healing journey we are. But find out what that next step is that you need now. What's the next thing?
Yeah. And sometimes we can be feeling really good. Like we don't have to be in a place where we feel like we're crawling out of a hole.
Right.
Like sometimes that's the most beautiful thing is things are good. And how can I just take that next step? Yeah. How can I take that next step? And maybe I do have this area that could be a little bit better. Or like you said at the beginning, I don't even know how good I could feel.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And I do think we all have a tendency to sometimes wear blinders. And so I love the idea of, okay, this helps you take a look at like, maybe is there an area you're missing? That needs your attention and you just really haven't wanted to look.
Yeah. Well, and everybody's story is so unique. Like on your results page, there's also a link of if you want to talk about your scenario, why you're different, why this feels hard for you, you can say, book a session with Amy of how to have it. And it's complimentary. We talk about it and you get to really see how it applies to you because I know what that feels like. Like information may not feel personal. And again, like I said, we all have our barriers and stories. And so sometimes it just helps to talk it through.
Absolutely. You are such an amazing resource. I want to touch on the podcast a little bit too, because I want listeners to hop over and check it out. I love, I have fought the advice for the past 3 years of doing solo episodes as well, or even like coaching snippets. And you do such a great job with that in addition to the interviews that you've done. So to share a little bit about the podcast with listeners.
Oh, sure. It was what I realized was when people decided, okay, you know what, I'm going to come and try coaching. Most people are new to coaching.
Sure.
Maybe if you're listening here, you know Julie's magic and we don't need to get over that barrier to coaching. But people who ended up getting to work with me and deciding to work with me, it was like, because we had a conversation and I thought, I can email. I'm like, but I know podcasts for me. There are people I've never met that I feel like they have guided me on my journey.
Sure.
Yeah. So I wanted to, it was a humbling thing to say, okay, I maybe have something to say in this space. And the solo, I had to get some bravery, but it's about half and half. And the more I'm actually going to be experimenting with the podcast live, meaning we come together and you get to actually get questions answered and get coaching in real time because we can talk about coaching all day long, but until you experience it, it's hard to really feel that shift. So the podcast is a mix of expert guests and each episode is framed as a habit, which is kind of fun because we talk about, I like structure. That's the scientist in me. We talk about what a habit is to consider, why it matters, a little bit of the science. And then my favorite part, how do we actually make it happen? How do you actually take it and apply it to your real life? Again, these things only work and only make a difference if we feel encouraged and inspired and capable to put it into play right when you listen.
I love that. Action, right? I mean, that is the magic in coaching.
Yes.
Is, yes. And circle back to the very beginning of the shifting mindset. That's an action. It's not, it's lots of actions usually.
And it's so right. Yeah,
Yeah.
I call them inner habits and outer habits. So like
Yeah.
our inner ones are our thoughts and our feelings, but they're
Mhm.
just as real as the outer ones, as you know.
Well, and those are in my humble opinion and science, the inner habits are, if you don't address the inner habits, the outer habits are not going to last or work. Like they're just not.
Amen. You're right. You're right.
Yeah.
Science, and you're humble. You have a pretty good
Yeah.
opinion. Yeah.
Science and experience,
Yeah.
all the stuff that I used to think was woo woo. I'm like, oh, this is really old science, actually.
Yeah. And you know, the ratio actually that is proven again in the science is that for every 20% of our time we spent learning, we need to spend 80% of our time taking action.
And there's your
So
20/80 rule.
there's my 20/80. Yeah, there's an episode on the 20/80 rule. And think about that. Like I used to read books. I couldn't even get through one without starting another one. It's like I wasn't even slowing down long enough
Right.
to digest it, let alone absorb it and apply it. So really it's okay, come together. This is for everything in the club, the podcast. We come together, we learn a little bit, then we get out into the real world to game time, go apply it, and then okay, come back. How did it go? What do we need to troubleshoot? How did that work? Because if we're just tossing around more ideas and not real life, this is what happened,
Yeah.
it doesn't land the same.
Yeah. And don't you find sometimes the things that people think are going to be the easiest to just incorporate as a habit are the ones that, which is always where the best learning is anyway. But, I've
Yep.
had clients, I'm sure you have too, who, aren't really, they're resistant to things like SMART goals, or, they don't want
Yep.
to tell me when they're going to do something or how they're going to
Yeah.
remember to do it, or no, and I'm
Yeah.
always like, oh, I can't wait until they come back and haven't done it, because
Yeah.
now we can actually start to work. Yeah.
Yes, and I use the strategies I use. It's called the ABC Habit Playbook,
Hmm.
and it's these 26 strategies that we mix and match and we use to tackle our opponent, which is a habit we want to make.
Yeah.
And so one of them is called From Mind to Matter, meaning when we, for example, let's say we're trying to practice a new thought habit or a new belief,
Mhm.
they sometimes don't believe me that we need to actually write it, say it. You have to take it from mind to matter, or it doesn't count. That rep doesn't count unless we make it real in the world.
Right.
And so that's
It's like
one.
saying, oh, I looked at my weights today and,
Yes,
thought about lifting them. Well, great.
totally.
Step one, maybe,
Yeah.
but uh,
Yes.
I love that. Amazing. For those that are listening on the go and aren't going to check out the show notes, where's the very best place to find you?
Oh my goodness.
I know,
Yes.
trick
So
question.
trick question. The quiz is on my website, www.com.
Love it.
And the quiz is /quiz after that. If anyone's interested in what coaching can look like, that's /join. And yeah, you can find me on the podcast, The Habit Hub for Autoimmune Health. And I give you lots of spaces. I'm also on Instagram at Amy Behimer Coaching.
Awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
And here's your chance. It can be something new. It can be something you've already said. What is that one step that listeners can take starting today to improve their health?
It's funny, it's exactly what you just said, but starting today. So starting today, not just doing something from mind to matter, doing some action that is a line in the sand, that we're starting today, that we have this before and after. We have this before when I was managing an autoimmune disease to after when I'm creating autoimmune health. And that journey is going to look so different for everybody. But what is the one thing? Is it taking the quiz? Is it something active from mind to matter to say, this is the day? Is it reaching out to someone that you thought, gosh, maybe this person could help and I'm up to try something different? Is it, yeah, trying something different to draw that line in the sand?
I love it. Draw the line in the sand. Amazing. It is today, can be the first day. Make it the
Yes.
first day.
Yes.
Amen.
And it's a direction, not a speed. So I mean,
Yes.
you don't,
And
if you
it's
start-
never a straight line. I can tell all
No.
of you right now, not
Yep.
once have I ever seen it be a straight line.
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
Well, because you'll never look back and say, I wish I would have started later. I mean,
Right.
ever. I mean, it will,
Right.
even if it feels like the first couple are falls, you're learning along the way.
Yeah.
And, time truly does, it goes so fast, and we might as well be inching in the direction of what that is, feeling better and ultimately functioning better. I mean, we have the power to change how this body functions. And it is just amazing if we take that ownership and we take that on and are willing to accept that responsibility, how empowering it can be.
Amazing. Such incredible gold. Amy, thank you so very much for your time and wisdom today. And again, listeners, check out the podcast, take the quiz, draw the line in the sand,
Yes.
do something. Today can be day one.
Julie, thank you for everything you put out, and I listen, and it's just such good information and inspiring, and I appreciate you. I'm so glad that we now know each other in each other's world.
As am I. Thank you so much. And for everyone listening, remember you can get those show notes and transcripts by visiting inspiredliving.show. I hope you had a great time. I'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to Julie Michelson's Inspired Living with Autoimmunity. Did you enjoy this episode? Please like, share, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to get a transcript of this and every other episode, just head on over to inspiredliving.show or click on the link in this episode's description. There, you can also find everything we discussed in this episode, including links and information about our guest. You can even send in your questions to be answered by Julie in a future episode. That's inspiredliving.show. Until next time, this is Julie Michelson's Inspired Living with Autoimmunity podcast, helping you take your power back.